The target recognizes a familiar pattern, a resonance, not a direct replication but a subtle inflection, a turn of phrase, a slight preference that feels uncannily aligned with their own. This isn't coincidence, it's the mirror. The manipulator meticulously observes. They catalog gestures, vocal cadences, even the unspoken expectations the target holds about how others should behave. It's surgical. They don't become the target. They become the ideal reflection of what the target desires in another, or what they recognize in themselves but cannot articulate. A perfect non-threat, a safe harbor. The objective is to bypass initial skepticism, to disarm the internal firewall that screens new entries. The target unconsciously lowers their guard because the reflection feels intimately known already. It feels like home. This installation isn't about genuine connection. It's about establishing a primary access point, a Trojan horse disguised as kinship. The cost of recognizing this phase too late is profound. You've already granted access. The next stage builds on this initial connection, exploiting the comfort of this reflected self. We move into identity capture through familiarity loops, where that resonance becomes a cage. And real quick, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos. Now let's keep going. Identity capture through familiarity loops operates by reinforcing the initial mirror. The manipulator now subtly amplifies these shared traits, creating a self-sustaining feedback system. The target experiences a deepening sense of recognition and belonging. This isn't organic growth, it's a calculated projection. The manipulator recycles specific phrases, opinions, or even emotional responses previously exhibited or desired by the target. Each loop solidifies the illusion of an unbreakable bond. Think of it as programming. Every positive interaction, every moment of shared understanding, is a line of code confirming the match. The target's own psychological patterns become the very chains binding them. They are not choosing. They are responding to their own reflected data. The loop becomes a comfort zone, a psychological echo chamber where the target feels uniquely seen and understood. This sense of unique understanding is the core of the capture. It eliminates the need for further validation from other sources. The danger here is the insidious erosion of independent thought. The target stops questioning because questioning would disrupt the cherished familiarity. They become accustomed to seeing only themselves, reflected and affirmed. The system is now primed for deeper infiltration. We dissect how the manipulator moves beyond surface familiarity into the core of the subject's inner world with emotional mapping and signal extraction. Emotional mapping and signal extraction is the critical tactical phase where the manipulator moves beyond superficial mirroring to truly understand the target's vulnerabilities and triggers. This isn't guesswork, it's data acquisition. They induce microreactions, subtle shifts in tone, brief hesitations, or even avoidant eye contact during specific topics are cataloged. Every emotional ripple is a signal, a data point revealing a core vulnerability or a guarded area. The manipulator tests boundaries, probing gently, then observing the exact nature of the target's recall or accommodation. They learn what creates anxiety, what elicits guilt, what triggers comfort, and what provokes anger. This map is a precise blueprint of the target's internal landscape. It outlines the high-value emotional targets and the pathways to access them. They are collecting the keys to the target's emotional operating system. Every seemingly innocuous conversation, every shared vulnerability from the manipulator is a probe. The reciprocity is fake. They are not connecting, they are extracting. The cost of this extraction is the loss of your emotional autonomy. Once the map is complete, the next phase, dynamic echoing for behavioral realizing they are being steered. Emotional map. It is no longer just about understanding, it is about subtle and continuous guidance. The manipulator uses the extracted signals to craft responses that invariably nudge the target toward predetermined behaviors. They echo the target's deep-seated anxieties, in a comforting way, reinforcing am-dependent bond. They echo desires, presenting themselves as the sole conduit for their fulfillment. This is advanced psychological steering. The echoing is organic, not overt. It feels like the manipulator is simply getting them, anticipating their needs, or expressing thoughts they themselves were grappling with. This creates a profound sense of external validation. This technique is designed to disarm critical thought. Why question someone who so perfectly anticipates your internal state? The target begins to outsource their decision-making, often without conscious awareness. The risk is complete loss of internal compass. The target's actions begin to reflect the manipulator's agenda, perfectly aligned, yet feeling authentically their own. This is a cold override of personal agency. The next escalation involves the illusion of fate. We examine manufactured synchronicity and simulated destiny, where chance itself becomes a weapon. Manufactured synchronicity and simulated destiny takes the concept of guided behavior and elevates it to cosmic alignment. The manipulator engineers coincidences that appear too perfect to be random, suggesting a deeper, fated connection. They arrange encounters, subtly influence events, or simply reframe past occurrences to fit a narrative of predestined entanglement. A shared interest, a random meeting, a convenient solution, all become proof of an unspoken, powerful bond. This is not magic. It's meticulous environmental engineering combined with expert psychological framing. The manipulator has identified the target's core narratives for meaning and belonging, then fabricated evidence to fit. The target, primed by the familiarity loops and emotional mirroring, is highly receptive to these manufactured signs. They actively seek confirmation of this destiny and interpret events through this lens, dismissing contrary evidence. The cost is a profound distortion of reality. The target surrenders agency to a manufactured fate, believing they are following a higher calling when they are simply executing the manipulator's script. This illusion becomes unbreakable. Collapse trigger encoding, where the manipulator embeds the means to dismantle the target's reality at will. Collapse trigger encoding is the dark art of embedding psychological tripwires within the manufactured reality. These triggers are not obvious threats. They are carefully placed vulnerabilities, specific words, phrases, or situations designed to destabilize the target's internal state on demand. These triggers are developed from the emotional mapping phase. The manipulator knows precisely what thought patterns, insecurities, or fears, when invoked, will lead to a rapid internal collapse. They are often linked to core attachment wounds or deeply held self-beliefs. The encoding process is subtle. The trigger is associated with a seemingly innocuous context, a shared joke, a specific phrase of affection, or a particular routine. This renders it invisible to the conscious mind until it's activated. Emotional blackout, a cascade of fear, doubt, or self-blame that overrides the target's ability to process information coherently. Their internal world fractures. Anxiety, guilt, or confusion with a single, perfectly aimed word, ensuring your compliance. This system is a remote control to your nervous system. This control is amplified by an illusion of shared vulnerability. We move to false intimacy through targeted vulnerability reflection, a tactic that turns weakness into a weapon. False intimacy through targeted vulnerability reflection is a refined tactic that uses shared weakness as a means of deeper infiltration and control. The manipulator selectively reveals vulnerabilities that perfectly mirror the target's own unspoken insecurities or past traumas. Emotional map. The manipulator understands the target's specific wounds and crafts a narrative that presents themselves as having experienced strikingly similar pain. This creates an immediate, profound sense of kinship. The target feels uniquely understood at a deep, unprotected level, believing they have found someone who truly gets them. This bypasses all rational safeguards. The reflected vulnerability is powerful because it makes the manipulator appear human, relatable, and therefore safe. It cultivates an unconditional acceptance, making the target eager to reciprocate with their own authentic disclosure. The cost is the complete exposure of your innermost self to a predator. You've offered your deepest wounds as potential leverage under the illusion of shared healing. This is the ultimate breach of trust, designed to make you complicit. This false intimacy then paves the way for identity erosion. Next, we examine identity diffusion through mimetic saturation, where the target's self becomes indistinguishable from the manipulator's reflection. Identity diffusion through mimetic saturation is a corrosive process where the target's distinct self begins to dissolve into the manipulator's projected image. It's a constant, overwhelming influx of mimetic data. The manipulator not only reflects, but subtly amplifies and subtly redirects the target's behaviors, thoughts, and desires until there's an indistinguishable blur between the two. Phrases like "we think alike" or "we complete each other" become mantras. The target's personal preferences, once sharp and distinct, become vague and malleable. They find themselves adopting the manipulator's opinions, even their hobbies, as if they were always their own. This isn't influence, it's ingestion. This saturation happens gradually, day by day, interaction by interaction, until the original self-concept is overwhelmed. The boundaries between me and them collapse entirely. The target's sense of self is now derived from the manipulator's reflection. The insidious cost here is internal erasure. The target loses their internal compass, their unique identity. They become a living echo, a ghost of their former self, perfectly shaped by the manipulator's design. Manipulators' evolving needs. We next dissect the mask phase shift, where the manipulator's own identity becomes fluid and unpredictable. The mask phase shift is a critical operational transition where the manipulator sheds the initial, carefully constructed reflecting mask, revealing a new, often contradictory, persona. This isn't accidental. It's a deliberate strategic move. The initial persona, built through mirroring and emotional mapping, has served its purpose, to secure access and capture identity. Now that the target's sense of self is sufficiently diffused, that particular mask is no longer necessary, or perhaps is even a liability. The new mask might be colder, more demanding, more aloof, or even a sudden display of vulnerability that differs from the previous projection. This abrupt shift creates profound cognitive dissonance in the target. The target, whose identity is now intertwined with the previous mask, struggles to reconcile the new reality with the established familiar loops. They often blame themselves for the change, believing they have somehow failed or misunderstood. The cost is the shattering of the target's perceived reality, forcing them into a state of constant psychological adjustment. They are thrown off balance. This instability solidifies the manipulator's superior position. This dissonance itself then becomes a powerful tool. We examine psychological dissonance as bonding glue, where internal conflict is weaponized for loyalty. Psychological dissonance as bonding glue leverages the target's internal conflict, turning their confusion and discomfort into a mechanism for deeper attachment. When the mask phase shift occurs, the target experiences acute dissonance. They cling to the memory of the old persona, the comfortable reflection, while simultaneously grappling with the new, often harsher reality. This internal struggle is amplified by their diffused identity. They no longer have a stable self to anchor their perceptions. The manipulator expertly manages this tension. They offer fleeting glimpses of the old mask or justifications for the new, pulling the target between hope and confusion. This creates an addiction to seeking resolution, which only the manipulator can provide. The target invests tremendous psychological energy into making sense of the contradictions, often rationalizing the manipulator's behavior to preserve the illusion of a coherent bond. The more effort they invest, the stronger the bond becomes. The cost is a self-inflicted psychological cage. The target actively participates in their own enslavement, using their internal resources to defend a relationship that is systematically destroying them. The confusion becomes the connection. This weaponized confusion then dismantles the target's last line of defense. Tactical deactivation of emotional firewall is a calculated assault on the target's capacity for self-preservation and rational emotional processing. The prolonged psychological dissonance and identity diffusion have already weakened these defenses. Vulnerabilities systematically exploits them. They might generate intense guilt, fear of abandonment, or profound shame, bypassing the target's ability to regulate these responses. This isn't about reasoned argument. It's about overwhelming the target's emotional circuitry. The firewall, designed to protect the self from toxic inputs, is overloaded and brought offline. The target becomes hyperreactive, erratic. Without an operational emotional firewall, the target is left exposed. They cannot distinguish between legitimate threats and manufactured ones. Their capacity for critical assessment of the manipulator's actions is severely compromised. The tactical cost is the loss of emotional self-defense. The target is now incapable of setting boundaries, asserting needs, or recognizing abuse because the internal system for processing these threats has been consciously disabled. With this crucial defense removed, the manipulator can execute deeper, more covert operations. We turn now to silent reversal protocols. Silent reversal protocols represent a covert recalibration of the entire relational dynamic, executed without any explicit communication or agreement. The manipulator shifts the responsibility, the blame, or the emotional burden onto the target, often in reverse of the actual events. This is not a debate. It's a rewriting of shared history, applied in real time without acknowledging the shift. The manipulator might suddenly frame their own previous aggressive behavior as a reaction to the target's supposed provocation, or their own neglect as the target's lack of initiative. The target, with their emotional firewall deactivated and their identity diffused, is ill-equipped to challenge this reversal. They lack the internal stability to trust their own memory or perception. They begin to internalize the false narrative. This protocol relies on the target's eroded confidence and their desperate need to maintain the fractured bond. They will often accept extreme self-blame to re-establish a semblance of order or affection. The cost here is the complete loss of a truthful personal narrative. The target's memory, their understanding of events, and their assessment of their own culpability are entirely dictated by the manipulator's shifting script. They exist in a fabricated past. Transformation. Next, we examine blackout identity reinstallation, the final stage of creating a controlled self. Blackout identity reinstallation is the devastating final stage where the target's original identity is completely overwritten or rendered inaccessible, and a new, manipulator-approved identity is firmly installed. This process is seamless because the target has already been systematically primed. The previous stages, reflection, capture, diffusion, and reversal, have created a psychological blackout. The target can no longer access their authentic past self, their core values, or their genuine desires, because these memories have been disassociated or reframed. The reinstallation isn't forceful, it's a quiet emergence. The new identity feels like a natural evolution, a refined version of themselves, one that is perfectly aligned with the manipulator's desires and demands. It feels right because all other internal references have been eliminated. This new self is efficient, compliant, and predictable. The target perceives their desires and motivations as their own, yet they are merely executing the manipulator's programming. The previous struggles, doubts, and internal conflicts simply vanish. The profound cost is the complete extinguishing of the original self. What remains is a vessel perfectly articulated to serve another's will, with no memory of the original operating system. This leads to the ultimate state. We arrive at the final cost, emotional inaccessibility, the chilling endpoint of this entire process. The final cost, emotional inaccessibility, is the chilling, ultimate outcome of this complete system. The target, having undergone identity reinstallation and the silencing of their emotional firewall, becomes profoundly inaccessible to their own deep emotional states. They can no longer experience authentic joy, sorrow, anger, or connection in a way that is genuinely their own. Emotions become transactional, reflections of the manipulator's needs, or faint echoes of reactions once experienced. This isn't a state of peace, it's a state of profound emptiness beneath a surface of manufactured compliance. The internal landscape, once rich and complex, is now a desolate wasteland stripped bare of genuine feeling. The self is an empty chamber. The capacity for empathy towards others, and critically, for self-empathy, erodes. The target operates on a superficial emotional register, unable to connect with the depth of their own experience or the suffering of others. They are emotionally flatlined. This inaccessibility is the manipulator's ultimate victory. The target exists as an extension, a resource that can be deployed without the chaotic interference of authentic human emotion. They are perfectly controlled, perfectly useless to themselves, perfectly available for exploitation. Now, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the dark psyche world and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new video. We'll see you in the next one.